fundamental organizing notion in a country is equality. What does that say about us? That we have not changed this. We still have orderly systems. What the heck is an orderly system? You're asking a person to go out and fight crime, but in the morning you want him to clean your shoes, you want him to get your wife milk, you want him to take your kids to school. Give me a break. What is this? So, we have to change mindset. Now, you cannot change mindset by merely saying. You have to create structures that make it happen. Before I go on to the structures, I just wanted to say that the primary duty of a policeman today as a citizen in uniform is to protect life, property, and one more most important thing. He is to protect the constitutional values and the liberties that we have been given under the Constitution and create an environment. That is the duty of a policeman, to create an environment of safety and security which allows the optimum realization of these rights. That is a completely different role from the role that was envisaged when they were colonials or when we had colonials. And if that is your vision, and I'll give you a small illustrations to indicate this. Can a woman in Delhi or Bihar or in some rural area put on her dress, put on her lipstick, take her bag and walk out at midnight to go and join her work, which is from midnight to 12 noon, if she's working a night shift? Can she do that with safety? If your answer in your mind is yes, then we have got the police that we want. If your answer is no, then, ladies and gentlemen, you don't have the police that you want and you don't have the police that you deserve. And so how do we get there? Now, the mechanics of reform. I won't go into the history of reform because it's just too long. And you really must tell me when I have to stop. I won't go into the history of reform, but suffice it to say that there was a watershed in 2006. Mr. Prakash Singh, who is a ex-police officer, had put a public interest litigation in 10 years before. And finally, in 2006, the Supreme Court passed a series of directives. And I'm not going to go into every detail of them, it's very technical. But suffice it to say also that the whole design of the new policing is in those general guidelines and directions. And these are, the Supreme Court said to the states, you know that police is a state subject, right? I don't have to explain that. It's only the center only rules over Delhi, Daman, Diu and these union territories. But it told the states and it told the center, create a body that will take the police and set it apart or keep it separated from the kind of political influence, and I'm using these words very carefully, illegitimate political control and interference with the police. This is not the same as having a political executive that has legitimate civilian oversight over the police. In a democracy, you cannot have the police running around doing their own thing autonomously. So I do not speak of autonomy, but the idea of a state security commission was that it would do several things. It would lay down the general policy for policing. It would create with the police a policing plan. It would look at the performance of the police. And it would be the bridge between the political executive, and I'll just explain what I mean by that, and the policing establishment. Each of these would have a role which was very well defined. The political executive, by the political executive I mean the elected representatives and the bureaucracy through which it manifests, through which it does its work. So on the one hand you have them, and on the other hand you have the police establishment and the chief of police. I mean, it's so simple that it really doesn't need explanation, but supervision and control under the present police acts is not properly defined. So there was a need to define it and a need to create a body. The body that was created by the Supreme Court said, let's have some outsiders and let this policing notion become bipartisan. Let it become multi-partisan. Let us not have the notion of a chief minister in whose pocket the police is for 5 years. Then he changes, then we start cases against him, and then the other chief minister comes, along with his favorites, along with his patronage. We have to break that pattern. So that pattern can be broken if you have a State Security Commission that has independent members and that has people of respectability, as well as the chief minister, the home minister, and also the leader of the opposition. And really, ladies and gentlemen, if you see the logic of it, I want to dwell on this a little bit because you see the logic of it. How are policing plans made today? Perhaps Kiran can elucidate on that because I myself am not certain. But if you have a 5-year plan and then you have a 1-year plan and you put in place the resources that are needed to fulfill that plan, then you can hold the chief of police accountable for operationalizing that plan. It's just like you were running a corporate house, or even if you're running your family. People know what their roles are. People know how to come together and discuss them. In other jurisdictions, like in South Africa for instance, the policing plan is trickle up. The police get together with the community, small communities, and ask them, what's your problem? It might be gambling in one, it might be women's safety in another, it might be organized crime in a third, it might be all these things. The community says, what communities say is filtered upwards within the police. To that is added what the police themselves are worrying about. We haven't got enough resources, we don't have enough cars, we haven't got the right kind of training. How do we deal with domestic violence? We never had any training on it. And so it goes upwards. And it is discussed, it is planned out, it is worked out with the bureaucracy. And then you have a plan. When you have a plan, whose responsibility is this to make that plan happen? The responsibility is with the police chief. So the police chief must have an area of his operational functioning, operational responsibility that is solely his, which means that you have to make laws. And we have put this, I'm saying this so that you can have an example when you go home. We have put this in the new draft of the Delhi Police Act, which is on the books. We hope that it will pass with all of these conditionalities that we have put, and which makes it absolutely clear what is the role of the executive and what is the role of the police. All orders for the police must come through the Home Ministry and the Home Secretary and nowhere else. It must be in writing. If there is any dispute, the dispute must be in writing. The orders on how to resolve that dispute, if it comes, because the political executive is always more powerful and must always be on top of the police. If the political executive says, no, this is the way it's going to be done, it must be gazetted. And when it is gazetted, it must be put before the assembly that this was a disputed area and the assembly must discuss it. That way, everybody is safe. The police chief is safe. The distinction about what is being discussed is in the public, and nobody can hide behind exemptions from the Right to Information Act or agree to obey orders that are oral. In the case, there are also other, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but there are also other safeguards. The policy, the general policy, is to be laid down by the people's representative, by the chief minister, by the home secretary, etc. But the home secretary, no one can interfere with an individual case, or with crime fighting, or with how the police will deal with a certain matter. This is also the law here. I mean, it's in our criminal code. But the practice has become so vitiated, and it's become so subverted that we no longer know who is doing what. And because the police chief has full responsibility for transfers, for postings, because he is going to be given under the directives that have been given by the Supreme Court, security of tenure, that he cannot be removed except for certain reasons, again written down in the statute. He can only be removed for certain reasons, and he's given a three-year tenure. And then there are criteria laid down that there will be a panel